Hi, I'm Stuart. Welcome to my channel. Thanks for viewing my video. In this video, I'm going to give an update on my progress for the Spooky Scary Skeleton 2024 Halloween Readathon by Nicole at Nicole's Bookish Nook. I realize it's kind of late being the 22nd of October for my first update. I wanted to wait until I had enough to say in the video. Early in the month, there were some books that came through on Libby that I had to read, and I didn't get to start on this as quickly as I liked. I am going to give reviews for the 3 books that I completed for this readathon. I'm going to talk about 3 other books I'm currently reading. I'm going to talk about the prompts that I probably won't be able to satisfy this month, but hopefully I will be able to by the end of the year. I'm going to include the co-hosts for this readathon in the description of the video, and to the best of my ability, all of the participants in this readathon in the description of my video. I'm going to talk about 2 Halloween Wobbles I created and one I'm working on, because those continue the Halloween theme. The first book I'm going to talk about is Natural Beauty by Ling Wang. This is a book that satisfies prompt 8. I'm cheating a little bit on this because this wasn't one of the original books. I actually picked 2 books for this prompt, and this is not one of them. And I started, I believe, in late September, although I did read most of it in October. But because I kind of got a slow start on this readathon, I'm going to update my original predictions for the books I was going to read, and this is going to be my book for prompt 8, which is a book with a black cover. And the 2 books that this is going to replace are The Murders of Molly Southbourne number 1 by Tay Thompson, and the Survival of Molly Southbourne number 2 by Tay Thompson. The reason it's 2 books is the first one didn't have much black on the cover and the second one did, so I felt I had to read the second one to satisfy the prompt, and I wouldn't read the second one without the first. I will hopefully read these books by the end of the year, because these are books that I'm reading as part of trying to read authors from 6 countries I've never read books from before. These are authors from Nigeria. I did review Natural Beauty by Ling Wang in my last weekly wrap-up, but I'm going to also review it here. Probably say mostly the same things I said there, just to be complete. So all the books that I included this readathon are in the videos I'm doing. Probably this one, and there'll probably be a final one toward the end of the month. The book is narrated in the first person by an unnamed narrator. She is the child of Chinese immigrants. She's a promising pianist in her youth. She is able to study at an academy. Unfortunately, her parents are involved in a bad car accident, and after that she no longer studies the piano. She's working in a restaurant, and a person comes into the restaurant by the name of Sage, who is actually the owner of a company called Holistic, which is a beauty lifestyle company. And she says to the unnamed narrator that she should come to her company the next day and she would have a position for her. And the unnamed narrator does go the next day, and she is hired. This beauty company is a high-end beauty company. They offer creams, supplements, treatments. As the story goes on, the company seems a little cult-like. The employees of this company are required to do certain of the treatments and supplements, etc., and they're really monitored for it. If they don't follow various regimens, that is brought to their attention, and I guess ultimately they could lose their jobs if they do it too much. This book is partly a commentary on how Western beauty standards predominate, and even people like a child of Chinese immigrants aspire to those Western standards. The book was a very hard to put down read. As the book went on, especially in the latter parts of it, it got really tense, was really gripping. I enjoyed it greatly. There are some things, though, you should warn people about. There is some body horror in it. There are some SA scenes. There is some racism. There is some bullying when the unnamed narrator's in school. There's one particularly bad incident of bullying that really disturbed me. I suggest this book to anyone who wants to read a horror novel set in the real world with commentary on Western beauty standards and perhaps why they're not always the best idea. I only suggest you take into account the issues I mentioned. Look at content warnings if you think those things might be a problem for you. I rated the book 5 stars, and it's certainly one of the best books I've read this year. The second book I want to talk about is Carmela by J. Sheridan Le Fanu. This book satisfies spooky prompt number 1, which is read a classic horror novel. It must be at least 30 years old. I've had this book for a while, and I've wanted to read it. This book is edited by Carmen Maria Machado, which people that I hear talk about said she's a very good choice because there is some lesbian undertones to this book, and some people think they weren't handled that well. And as a lesbian, Carmen Maria Machado is a good choice for that. This book is set in 1871, thus it satisfies the prompt of at least 30 years old. The story is told in the first person by Laura. She lives in a manor house in Austria with her father and servants. She's quite lonely. There is a stagecoach and some riders, and the stagecoach goes over sideways, and one of the people in the stagecoach, Carmela, apparently is injured in some way by this accident, and her mother suggests to Laura's father, requests that could she stay with them for a few weeks while the mother goes on with her business. He accedes to this, and Laura's really happy because she's really lonely. Carmela is beautiful and mysterious. Laura and Carmela develop a basically good relationship. Carmela does have some strange habits. As the weeks go by, Laura starts to get weaker, and there are in the area some unexplained deaths. I won't say what happens from there, but the story goes on. I did find in a couple of occasions I got a little bored by the story. In those times I had a little trouble keeping my eyes open. One time could maybe be explained because it was 10:30 at night, but another time was at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And that could have just been I was having an off day too, except that I suffer from insomnia, and what I do is when I realize I can't go back to sleep, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, I sit up in bed, get my Nook and read, and often I read for an hour, and it doesn't make me sleepy, so a book that makes me a little sleepy makes me a little concerned. Overall, I did enjoy the book, but it was a little disappointing. I couldn't tell you what I really expected, but I do have a little disappointment in this book. I would rate it 3 stars, which is my lowest rating for a book that it's an acceptable read for me. Bump it up to 3.5 for a couple of reasons. One was the introduction by Carmen Maria Machado. She talked about how it was discovered that there were some letters in J. Sheridan Le Fanu's house that the correspondence talked about a relationship between 2 women at that time, And it was obvious that that was the basis for the story between Carmela and Laura. And he had excised some parts of it. And she also added footnotes throughout the book, which were interesting too. But it's mainly the introduction, which was of interest to me. The other thing that rose it above a 3-star was there were some very good drawings in the book. Very impressive drawings. So that raised it above 3 stars too. I don't want to sound like this is any kind of really bad book. It's just, for whatever reason, it didn't hit me like I hoped it would. I do want to read it again at some point. Maybe it was just the time I was reading it. I've been reading a lot this month and a lot of really good books. Maybe they just didn't, for me anyways, compare. I know it's a classic. I understand that, but it does have a really good Gothic atmosphere, and I do recommend it for somebody who wants a Gothic atmosphere, wants to read one of the early vampire tales, possibly one of the earliest. Although people say that, but there's stories of vampires going back thousands of years in various cultures. But this is one of the first, if not the first, books that actually talked about vampires. It is a short book too, so it's not really difficult to get through. Hopefully your experience will be better than mine. Again, I don't want to sound like it's a bad book or anything. It just was kind of disappointing for me. As I said, I rated it 3.5 stars. The next book I completed is The Very Irregular Secret Society of Witches by Sangu Mandana. This book satisfies prompt 5, which is read a book with a witch as the main character. Mika is the main character of the book, and she's a witch. The book is set in present-day England. Witches exist, obviously, or else she wouldn't be a witch, but people in general don't know about witches, and the witches want to keep their existence a secret because they're concerned about persecution if it's discovered there's witches. With only occasional exceptions, 2 or more witches can't gather in one area because there'll be too much of a buildup of magic and it could make them subject to detection. Mika's in her early 30s. She slightly pushes against the constraints. The head of the group of witches in England is Primrose, and she's very much wants to stick to the rules which she herself established. She raised Mika in her youth. Well, actually, she took Mika into her house, but other people raised Mika. Perhaps as being slightly rebellious. I might overstate by saying she's rebellious, but she does chafe a little bit against the requirements. Mika does a YouTube channel where she pretends to be a witch, despite the fact that she is a witch. She's contacted by a man named Ian, and he says that he would like her to come to the house he shares with a few other non-witch adults. They have 3 young children, ages 9, 8, and 7, who are witches, and they would like Mika to come train them. They have a deadline in a few months where a solicitor is coming to their house who doesn't like them, and they're really fearful if he discovers that the 3 young girls are witches. Mika does go there, and she does agree to stay there and train the children. I went into this book thinking that the main part of the book was going to be the main character. I didn't know her name was Mika, but the main character was going to go to train these 3 witches, and it's kind of going to be a found family situation. And that was part of it. But what I didn't expect, which was kind of a bigger part of it, was there's a slow burn romance. You see pretty early who it's going to be, so it's not really a spoiler to say. There's a very grumpy individual named Jamie. He's a librarian at the house. He does not want Mika there. Mika's sunshiny, so it's a sunshine grumpy romance. But the romance is very slow burn. Matter of fact, kind of puts the slow and slow burn. And even though the time frame it takes place in over a few months makes sense. That it would go slowly, especially because of their very separate ways of looking at the world. And they're both damaged too. But I just thought it kind of dragged on too long. And I did enjoy the book. It was a good book. I guess I just would say it wasn't really a great book. An enjoyable read. I wasn't really disappointed in it in the way I was disappointed in Carmela, but it also didn't quite live up to what I expected. The book is very hyped. I've seen a lot of booktubers say positive things. I'm not questioning their opinions. I can see why people like it. And I do sometimes think this is partly a cozy book, but sometimes I think maybe cozy books aren't maybe my thing I'm totally suited to reading. But I did enjoy the book. There's also in the book a not super graphic, but a slightly graphic, spicy scene, which wouldn't have been out of place in most books, but it was kind of jarring because there was a tone to this book, and that scene came out of nowhere. I do not mind scenes like that, but I just think in this case it might have been better to be a closed door, fade to black scene than slightly graphic. Nothing which most people would be offended by. It just was a little out of place, a little jarring in the book. I recommend this book for anyone who would like a book with a slow burn, grumpy sunshine romance centered around witches and a significant found family elements. An older witch, not super old, she's in her 30s, but training young witches. I would only say be wary of it if you don't like spicy scenes at all. And not everybody probably likes cozy books, and this is like mostly cozy, so I don't think most people would dislike the book, but there's some people I think perhaps the book wouldn't excite. I rated it 3.75 stars, which is close to 4, which is my rating for a very good book. So it just fell a little short of that. Like I said, only maybe slightly less than I was expecting, but not as Carmela was kind of a disappointing read for me, not to that level. The next book I want to talk about is Goth by Itsuchi. I've read part of this book. This book satisfies prompt 2, which is read a fiction or nonfiction book about a serial killer. This is a Japanese horror novel translated from Japanese. This book stars 2 high school students, a boy and a girl. They are both obsessed with rather macabre things, such as serial killers, death. They're not truly friends, but they can be themselves when they're together. The boy, not that I consider myself a psychiatrist or anything, but the boy might actually be a psychopath. He doesn't seem to feel emotions, but he can fake emotions. He is able to ingratiate himself with his classmates just so he can fit in and he won't stand out. The girl doesn't care what the classmates think. She's perfectly happy being an outcast and just having people leave her alone. I'm not too far in the book. There is some very disturbing things so far. Fairly graphic descriptions of a serial killer and another person who mutilates people and animals in a way I won't say on here. It's getting into the mind of the boy, because he tells it in the first person. The girl, whose name is Marino, I can't remember the boy's name offhand. I don't know if it says in the back. It doesn't. I know I could look, but you see into his mind, it's not necessarily a pleasant place to be. It is an interesting book. I'm sure I'll complete this book. it's just not necessary for everybody, and when I'm done I will have some, I'm sure, rather serious content warnings people might want to look for. The next book I read part of is You Like It Darker by Stephen King. This book satisfies spooky prompt number 3. Read a book that has an orange cover or has the word orange in the title. This book has orange in the cover. When I was a young adult, Stephen King was my favorite author. He was really the one that took me from the sci-fi I read as a kid, which was good, but was about ideas, scientific ideas, not about character. And only in retrospect do I think I needed, as I transitioned to adulthood, read books about character. Not to say some sci-fi doesn't have that. I'm sure a lot does. I wasn't reading that kind of sci-fi. So Stephen King was my gateway into horror and other books that focus on character instead of largely just the plot and don't have much in the way of character. Despite him being my favorite author then, I have not read any new Stephen King books in decades. I'm not sure why this is. It wasn't because I didn't like him anymore. I just kind of tend to drift from one thing to the next. I did reread Pet Sematary a few years back when they did a new version of the movie. I wanted to read it again. Maybe not necessary because the movie took some liberties that weren't in the book, and I also read part of It in Salem's Lot. But this is the first new Stephen King book I've read in decades. I am currently on story 5. I think there's 12 stories in it. I've liked every story so far, and I will say that I'm really impressed. I believe he's done around 80 books, and he's in his late 70s. The fact that he can still, with all he's done, write interesting stories like this, variety in the stories, is really impressive to me. I will say, though, that I'm enjoying every story, but I wouldn't call any of the 5 that I read so far really horror stories. Some of them have horrifying things that happen at the end. Some are a little scary. What I'm reading now is kind of scary in the sense that I think law enforcement is overstepping their bounds. There is little supernatural elements in some of the stories, but they're not what I consider scary. They're just really good stories. And Stephen King still just has great detail about characters. I know not everybody likes that detail, I'm sure. My aunt used to read a lot of mysteries, and she would skip over what she considered unnecessary descriptive text. But he establishes locations, he establishes details about the character that I think you can really understand the characters even if you don't agree with them. He's very impressive in the details he does. And like I say, it's just doing it in his late 70s after so many books is really impressive to me. It makes me wonder, even if I'm saying this, why have it been so long before I read a new Stephen King book? But I'm glad I picked this one up, and certainly after finishing this one I can read more of his books. But I'm really liking it. The next book I read part of is The Haunted House from Hell by Mark Lestrange. This book satisfies prompt 4. Read a book with ghosts and or ghouls. This is a book I learned about a little while back in a video by Fred at Read by Fred. I'm enjoying the book so far. It does appear to me, though, that perhaps this is a book that possibly self-published or maybe wasn't gone over as much as it should by an editor. Not that I really see grammatical errors or spelling errors, things of that nature. Just like some of the dialogue and the situations don't ring quite true to me so far. Overall, it's interesting. I do have some reservations about it, which I'll wait till I talk about the book when I'm done. Perhaps I won't have those when I'm done with it, but it's just like a type of book that everybody reads a book sometimes that it just doesn't really quite ring true to you. Now, I'm talking about hauntings, of course, and hauntings wouldn't necessarily ring true to a fair amount of people anyway, but accepting it's a horror novel and you have to have a suspension of disbelief just the characters, some of their dialogue, their interactions, it doesn't quite seem realistic to me so far. I'm not too far into it though. So those are the 3 books I'm reading. I feel confident that I will complete them by the end of October. So I feel good about, completing 6 of the prompts. As I said before, I cheated a little bit on prompt 8 because I substituted natural beauty for the books I picked. But it is a black book, and even though I think I started it late September, I did read most of it in October. The 2 spooky prompts that I'm not sure I'm going to complete are spooky prompt number 6. Read a nonfiction or fiction book set during the month of October. The book is about Halloween. The book I selected is All Hallows by Christopher Golden. And if I do read this, it's probably going to be the audiobook because that's available for free on Hoopla. And the 7th prompt that I may well not get to either is read a thriller novel by an author you never heard of. This one I picked Alias Emma by Ava Glass. This is a spy novel, which I have not read a spy novel in years. So I may not get to these prompts this month. I do hope to get to them sometime this year. It's possible I may read one of them, but it's doubtful I'll read both of them. One other book that I read that I want to talk about briefly, even though it's not classified as a horror novel, is Orcs and Craig by Margaret Atwood. This is a dystopian novel which has commentary on the fact that in the book science is advanced very far, but to me anyway, it's a morally bankrupt society. And although all this results in basically the end of civilization, that's not a spoiler, you learn this early in the book. And although not classified as a horror novel, there's few things really not more horrifying than the fact science gone out of control with no really ethics involved and it resulting in the downfall of civilization. If you do want to read that one, there's a lot of content warnings, so I talked about them in my last video. I'm not going to repeat that here, but it could be, the scenarios in this book are believable to me, and that is very horrifying. Next, I just want to talk about some Halloween Wobbles I've been working on. A couple I completed and one I'm working on. This one here is Snooky the Ghost. Can't see here, but Snooky glows in the dark, which is kind of cool. And the next one I completed is as Luna the Bat. Luna came out really well. I'm really happy with how she came out. And what I'm working on now is Salem the Cat. I am partway through the body. You can see here. Partway through the body on this one. Same color as Luna. Luna the Bat, purple. And this one I expect to, I'll certainly be done with this one before I do my next and likely final wrap up for this readathon, which as I said will probably be late in October. Hopefully it doesn't slip till early November. Another thing I like to do for Halloween is when I drive around or when I go for a walk, just look at the Halloween decorations on people's lawns. I've seen some pretty good ones when I drive by places. I went for a walk this morning though, a typical walk I do sometimes when the weather is nice. I only saw a couple of, good Halloween decorations. And that was a little disappointing to me. I would have liked to see more than that. Another thing I do too, Halloween month, which runs a little counter to the kind of books I read for it, but I like to watch Halloween episodes of Disney Channel shows on the Disney Channel and certain movies, Girl vs. Monster and the Halloween Town movies. Really like to watch those. I haven't done that too much this year, but I will watch a few more shows and at least some of the movies. I'd be interested to know in my comments, anybody who reads this, whether you're taking part of the readathon or you aren't, what books, movies, shows, whatever you watched during Halloween season, what traditions you have Halloween month, anything else you might be interested related to Halloween you'd be interested to share, please do so in the comments. If you enjoy this video, please give it a like, please subscribe, please hit the bell to get notified when I upload future videos. I hope you're having a wonderful Halloween month, and I hope you're reading a lot of great Halloween books, watching great Halloween movies, or whatever other Halloween traditions you have. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, please subscribe, please hit the bell to get notified when I upload future videos.